the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
It's the sound of summer, isn't it?
Many people associate this particular bird with the sound of spring, actually. They're the first ones to arrive. At Hysh Farm, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the swallows, which are, I think, harbingers of summer. And this bird precedes the swallows by 2 to 3 weeks, the ones we're looking at. We're on the northern boundary of Hysh Farm. We're in Earsham Gravel Quarry, right deep down, and all the way around us we've got massive cliffs of excavated sand. And you wouldn't, because it's a busy working quarry, you wouldn't normally associate this with any bird life whatsoever. The machines are huge, excavating all this sand and gravel to sell, and yet it's a hive of activity. And we're looking at a cliff face, and here they come in. These are sand martins, and they are tiny. There's no blue sort of on them whatsoever, like there is with swallows and house martins. They're close cousins, and these are the smallest member of the three. Oh wow, 20 coming in simultaneously. And that's exactly how they behave. They're very colonial, is the best way to describe it. They like to do everything together. So once they arrive, the adults from last year peck away at the sand here, because it's quite fragile. And
they're above us now, Chris. Look.
Yes, look at that, a swarm of them. There's at least 20 there. And why it's so special is they've declined hugely. They spend our winter sort of close to the equator, just south of the Sahara. There's an area there called the Sahel, and it's a huge area, and it's suffered from droughts. Occasionally the rains down there completely fail. They're insectivorous birds, so they need to feed on the wing. That's why they don't stay here in the winter. Swallows, house martins, swifts as well, although swifts aren't related. And these sandbirds, they're now going into the nest holes. Oh wow, they're all doing it together. What you couldn't make it up, it's perfect.
This sand cliff is like a Swiss cheese. It's full of holes, there's dozens and dozens, and most of them are full with birds and presumably nests.
Yes, that's right. Now, what in nature, natural nest sites like this are quite scarce, because what they rely on is when rivers go round corners, they'll sweep the soil away in the winter months when you get the floods, and you leave a vertical face 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet above the river, and they're generally quite safe because there's water underneath. And again, they just perch on there. They've got very weak legs, as have swallows, swifts and house martins, but the sand martins just peck away and get a little sort of foothold, and then they'll excavate. Do to about 3 to 4 inches every day, and they excavate into the little sand faces, and more of them are going into the nest holes. Wow, they're just arriving from everywhere. Oh, wonderful! I just saw 3 go in one hole over there.
Presumably they're telling each other about where the insects are and all going off at once and then coming back at once.
The interesting thing about sand martin is their scientific name. I love it. It's called Riparia riparia, which basically means the river bird, and that's exactly what they are. So it's really absolutely extraordinary. So they feed over water. Now, we're on Hysh Farm, we're on sand with chalk underneath us, but we're really close, only 200 yards from the River Tass, with all the sort of flat water meadows there that flood in the winter, and that's where all the insects are. So there's going to be very few insects in here, but so they need somewhere to feed, which is the marshes next door to us. They need somewhere to nest, and fairly undisturbed as well. But I'm saying that because all the heavy machinery's working away right underneath the nest, and they don't give a jot about that. So So I'll just describe them. No blue on them, no red under the chin. Whole load of them going over us again.
I hope you can hear these birds. They're making a wonderful sound, but of course this is a working quarry.
Yes, it is.
It's a constant sort of chatter, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They, as I said, they're communal. They love doing everything together. But on the face of it, they look quite boring, but they're brown on their back. They've got white on the belly, unlike the house martin, which has got the white rump and the blue-black plumage, as is a swallow. But sand martins lack that, but there's something very distinctive. They have a brown collar, which comes from the back, goes under the chin and around, and so when they're flying over the top of us, you can just see the collar. Yeah, because we must have got 20 over us at the moment. Some quite low, wow, 10 or 15 feet above us, but constantly they're...
We've got a good view of that one. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Look at that. And now that's what I mean. They're almost bat-like in their size. Give you an idea, they're half the weight of a swallow, and swallows are tiny. So half the weight of a swallow, about a third less than a house martin. They're close relatives. And so they're absolutely tiny, and they just love this. They're very rewarding as we're watching them. We're just being entertained hugely by them, but they're also entertaining in themselves in that they love doing something called feather chasing. So one will come back with a feather, and you get these strong winds going up these cliff faces like this, and the feather can go anywhere, and the others just forget what they're doing and chase the feather and try and catch it and then take it into their nest hole. So they're playful.
So there's no other reason apart from them having fun and communicating.
That's right, and they seem to act as one, as you can see. They do everything together. So they're going out to feed together, they're coming back with food for them and going in the nest holes together. And we're just about at the time when the first young are hatching. Fledging, nesting and laying eggs, 3-4 perfectly white, round spherical eggs, incubated for about 14 days, and then 17 days or so in the nest, maybe a bit longer depending on the weather, and then the young come out, and they'll sort of fly around here learning about their territory, and then they'll join up with other young house martins, and they won't necessarily stay with mum and dad, who can, in a good season like this year, and they got here really early, they'll come for a second brood, but numbers nationally have declined absolutely colossally. Right back in the 1960s, I remember reading about the drought in the Sahel, and we had about 10% of our sand martins returning from the winter down there. It just dried up and they basically starved to death. So it's been a really rough time for them.
And can they suffer from nest raiders here?
Yes, this is the interesting thing. Birds like little owls will go in the larger holes and raid the young in there, but something kind of funny happened. I took my children down to a nature reserve in Suffolk called Minsmere, and they had excavated quite a steep bank to enlarge the car park there. That was in the 1990s, and they were very proud. They'd had around about 100 sand martins nesting there, and the next year they all returned, and while I was with my children we were watching, I don't know if you were the first to see it, but a stoat came along, clambered along on the almost vertical surface, managed to get in one of the holes and came out with a young sand martin, and it single-handedly, this stoat, more or less eliminated the entire colony, and so the sand martins didn't come back the next year, and it was 4 or 5 years before they did come back. But you can see how entertaining they are. I'm not strictly a bird watcher, I just get enthused and learning about the wildlife that shares the habitat around a farm, and I always know when they're here because they'll hunt over the fields behind us. We've got around about 100 acres, very close to where we are, of pollen and nectar fields, and they love hoovering over the top of that, occasionally mixed with swallows. But when you see a big flock like this, that's the sand martins. The swallows will often be hunting singly. The swifts will sometimes swarm as well, but I said they're more related to hummingbirds than they are the swallow, the house martin and the sand martin. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in another week or so we'll visit the local supermarket at Harford Bridges. I know how to give you a good time, Matthew, and we'll look at the house martins, which nest in buildings usually just under the eaves, particularly the farm cottages in the 1960s. And again, that's another species that's declined hugely. But this is a real treat. You described it as a cheese with lots of holes in it. I don't think I can beat that. There's a vertical surface right beside us.
Yeah, that one's quite low down, isn't
Yes.
it? So that might be vulnerable to a stoat or a snake.
Yes.
But these ones are real des reses, high up in a cliff,
Yes.
and very enlightened that the firm here leave that alone.
Yes, they do. Whilst the the sand martins are here, they leave it alone, and they've built a bund round here to stop anybody digging in, so there's no landslides. If you do get a landslide, there's been one a bit further down. There was a little bit of rain last night, and it's just caused a slip. But when you look along there, there's no nest holes. So, my mouth's wide open. I have to be careful in case a sand martin goes down there. But just right. You can see how tiny they are, though, compared to the swallows, thundering great brutes of swallows. These are tiny, tiny birds, and all coming out together now, and now going off down onto the marshes to feed. What a wonderful sight. I think that has to do I should finish there, because we can't beat it, but we're going to do another topic in a minute.
We've got some letters, emails, in the sunshine here, just on the edge of High Ash Farm. I think we're going back on the farm proper in a moment,
yes,
aren't we?
We are. What about that, Matthew? You know, just beautiful to stand for a minute and see this. Takes all the troubles of the world away. Look at that.
Just into May, and the Countryside podcasts really this week mainly about our feathered friends.
Yes, this is a bit of an update, because whilst we covered the swallows a few weeks ago, we might revisit them when the young leave the nest, and we're doing the same with the rooks here at High Ash Farm. Everybody gets a little bit confused about blackbirds in fields, and they're all communally called crows, I suppose, whether it's a jackdaw, a carrion crow or a rook. They're the three main species of lowland birds, but they're all quite different in their appearance and their habits. And the birds we're sitting next to now, by far the most sort of communal. They love nesting together, they feed together, and they nest in these colonies, and they're called the same as what seals have out on the seaside. You have something called a rookery, and this we're sitting right next to is a rookery here at High Ash Farm. There's about 120 nests, which is a fairly decent sized rookery. And what brought us here, it's a special time of the year, because the females, right through some of those gales that we had in early March and late February, they were actually laid their eggs then. How they stayed in the nest overnight, I have no idea. They were swinging about, and the nests, which are just made of sticks really, then sometimes you add a little bit of dried grass on the top with a slight cup in the centre of the nest. Sometimes a little bit of mud is added, and the adults are busy sort of laying eggs from that point onwards. So they're really early nesters, just one brood generally. 4 to 5 eggs, sort of bluish green background covered in brownish spots. Incubation about 17 days, And this is the interesting bit, because we hope to visit one of the hides in a few minutes' time, because the females are on the nest, the young are hatched, and some of them are reaching over. You can just see the little heads sticking out the top of the nest. I did bring some binoculars with us, which we'll use in a minute.
These nests are very high up in these trees,
Yes.
which are still, those trees are quite bare at the moment,
Yes,
aren't
they're ash trees. And right through the 1950s and 60s, rooks went in quite substantial decline. And many people thought it was to do with Dutch elm disease, because elms have very fine twigs in the top of the canopy, and once they'd died, they'd lost their main nesting habitat. But we've learnt that it's more change in agricultural practices, and particularly with early summer droughts that we're having this year, because rooks are insectivorous. They've got quite a wide diet. They will take farmers' grains as well. In fact, there's an old motto that describes a farmer broadcasting 4 cereal seeds out in his field, and it goes like this: 1 for the rook, 1 for the crow, 1 to rot and 1 to grow. And actually crows are mentioned in that, and crows generally don't eat the grain. It's almost entirely the jackdaw and the rook that probe down. Rooks have got very long beaks. It's another way of identifying them compared to the other two. Jackdaw has about a 2.5 centimetre beak. A rook, a massive 7.5 centimetre. That's getting on for 2.5 to 3 inches in old money, and a white sort of scaly skin around the base of the beak. And carrion crows don't have that. They have a shorter, slightly black beak with a few stiff feathers around the base of the beak. Rooks, I'll try and catch it on the camera for this Sunday's podcast, because rooks have very shiny plumage. Carrion crows have dull plumage. Jackdaws sort of somewhere in between, but jackdaws also have grey round the nape of their neck as well, and a little black patch right on top of the head. And jackdaws have silver blue eyes, the palest blue you can possibly imagine. So they're much smaller. Jackdaw 13 inches from tip of beak to tip of tail. Rooks a little bit smaller than carrion crows, so rooks perhaps 18 inches for the same measurements, and carrion crows perhaps 19 inches. Carrion crows get replaced with almost another species in the northern part of the UK, and they're called hoodie crows, or hoodies for short. So they've got quite a lot of white on them, on the back and on the belly, and some black as well, which is why they're called hooded crows. But this is lovely to see this, and we could just hear them bringing in the food. They're not bothered about us sitting here. There's a beech tree next to us, and that's now coming into leaf and sort of masking the other trees, but that ash tree's a little bit worrying in front of us, and that's quite well smitten with ash dieback disease, and that's what's happening out in the woods at High Ash Farm. The affected trees are just falling over, but fortunately these are all standing here at the moment with the rook's nests in the top. And if we just move a little bit, we might actually see some of the young rooks at this time of the year. They're called branchers because once they're old enough, about 3 weeks old, having hatched, they come out of the nest and clamber about on the branches at the top of the trees, and that's how they get that nickname. Let's just see if we can get in the right spot. Yes, I can see two or three of the nests with the young standing up in there. They're quite well advanced. They haven't left the nest yet. Some horses just going by. Morning, hey-o. And so that's their stage. So there'll be females there with the young in attendance, because they obviously can't leave the nest. The female's totally dependent on the male. They both, male and female, build a nest, but the female kind of, as females do, arranges the sticks in the order she wants. And they also steal sticks from other nests nearby, so when the occupants are out foraging for a new stick, you have thieves in the rook world, which is always quite amusing. But it's lovely to see those two right on top of the nest there, not ready to fly yet, but stretching wings and just up there calling. So what we're going to do now is to see if we can get a really close-up view by sitting in one of the hides at the farm. It's actually called the Yellowhammer Hide, but we'll go in there because there's grain out the front, and we'll just see if we get a close-up view of a rook.
We're out of the pickup now and doing our best not to make much noise as we head towards the hide.
Yes, Matthew, it's well secreted in this newly planted area of woodland, and it has a very large Heston bale in front of it, which you'll see in a moment, and then we just pop in the hide and sit quietly for a few minutes, and fingers crossed we'll have some of the male rooks come. And it's quite windy now. Oh dear, right on the far side of the field, quite a large one. That's a roe deer in the full sunshine.
Lovely fawn colour.
Yes.
Yeah. When Chris says "oh dear," it means there's a deer.
Yeah.
One of the most delightful and evocative sounds of the English countryside, Chris, the song thrush.
Yes, it's one of the success stories here at the farm. We've got quite a number of them nesting here, and it's one of the UK's most competent songsters singing away for us.
Just one of the sounds that you can hear regularly on this podcast.
And we've got a little favour to ask. If you can possibly help by sending us a donation to help support the running costs of the podcast by visiting highashfarm.com/podcast.
And thank you for all your donations.
Come on, let's get in this hide. There we are, a few more peanuts there as bait for the rooks. There we are. Nice seat. Excuse the aroma, Matthew. It's we've got some long-tailed field mice taking up residence in the roof. Just get the door shut. And Rat has been apprehended. He's allowed to be with us. And that deer's beautifully visible. It's working its way along the hedge on the far side of the field. So we're sitting in the hide here. Got perfect view over the farm, big panoramic view, and there's some large feeders in front of us, which are sort of being bypassed at the moment because I've got some grain out on the big bale in front of us, and then right in front of us is also a table which is high up. We're about 5 feet, 6 feet off the ground where we're sitting, so we get a bit more of a panoramic view, and I can see some rooks down the hedge there just sitting, wondering where those two strange humans and the four-legged dog went, all of which could be pests. So they're being a bit cautious.
Rat loves the aroma in here.
I think so. It's right up his street, yes. It's quite strong, and that's one of the smells that many people never come across these days. If you have house mice in your house, they're very sort of musty smell, and it's a smell that many people just don't recognise. So he's being very sensible coming on my lap. Now that roe deer heading down there is just heading up to an oak tree that it might get dive bombed because it's right underneath a buzzard's nest, and as it's going down the hedgerow, it's doing what roe deer do, and it's just browsing away on the young hawthorn growth, just selectively grazing, not at all perturbed. It doesn't know we're here. It's about 200 yards away, but we've got a perfect view of it, which is lovely. So all we have to do now is just sit and wait. And whilst there's no guarantee, because there's 100 acres of overwinter wild bird seed mix around where we're sitting, and it's just coming through the ground. And that old adage I described when we were at the rookery says that rooks and particularly jackdaws love freshly emerged corn, which is why if you ever meet a farmer and he has a red face, it's nothing to do with too much alcohol. It's just the pure fury that rooks sort of one flying towards us. And just checking out the territory. They'll have scout birds which go and just suss something out and check an area, and that deer is just having a whale of a time going along that hawthorn hedge, just pruning off the new growth, just totally unaware that we're here. Anyway, I think we've got a few questions, so whilst we're waiting, we can perhaps go through some of the questions and comments.
A lovely card all the way from Houston in the States. And this is Kathy. We live in Houston, Minnesota. So not Houston, Texas. About 25 miles from each Iowa and Wisconsin. We're near the Mississippi River.
Wow.
The mighty Mississippi.
Wow, that's a location.
Houston is home to the International Owl Center, with live owl educational program and a yearly owl festival. And Kathy says, I make stone owls and leather owl jewellery and other items for the gift shop. This card is one from the annual Children's Art Contest, and there's a
lovely.
beautiful picture on the card of some young owls
well
there.
done, and thank you very much for the donation that you sent in that card. I've got to trundle off to the bank. It's a cheque with some dollars in there, so got to get it converted. But thank you hugely. That's much appreciated.
Rick Adams, my wife and I really enjoy the podcast, Chris. Informative, still gentle and engaging, though. Your comments about the NHS staff from abroad during your hospital stay were very moving, both in respect to yourself and them. You've mentioned Mintil recently, and by coincidence, a Kenyan expert and advocate for the technique was talking about it on the BBC World Service. In addition to the benefits mentioned by yourself, countries in East Africa are beginning to implement it as a climate change strategy. Apparently it conserves moisture and also reduces erosion when the rains eventually arrive. And yes, Mintil has been a subject on various podcasts recently. It's a form of ploughing or preparing a field, isn't it, without going too deep?
Yes, it also saves fuel, and particularly in the African countries, fuel is a major cost of food production, as it now is here in the UK. So the large tractors, if you can employ them to get the seedbed ready with much less than half the normal fuel requirement, then farmers are prepared to change, despite being sort of very traditional in their outlook quite often. So we use it here at the farm. We have done this year, and we must have saved close on 1,800 to 2,000 gallons of red diesel. So it was well worth doing.
Especially the price of red diesel.
Oh, yes.
Or any other colour of diesel. And here's an email from Gillian Handyside, and she's got a few thoughts on a recent episode. Nettles. One way to stop them spreading for gardeners who don't want them to do that but are still interested, I presume, in having them, is to plant them in a big pot.
Yes, I've heard of that before.
Like mint or...
Yes. In fact, I've got mint in my porch to stop it spreading quite so much, and you get some really lovely early little sprigs of very aromatic spearmint, which I grow, and you can do the same with nettles. They form a very deep root structure, but one little tip, if you want them to thrive, butterflies, you can put them out in the garden at that point, they don't have to be indoors, is you put plenty of good old farmyard manure down the bottom of the pot, and you'll have nettles to die for.
And Gillian goes on to say, this is honestly just gratuitous bragging. We have hen harriers and Montagu's harriers arriving back on the open fields where we are, just southeast of Paris, to start nesting. There were several around on Tuesday the 21st of April. Just saying. I briefly heard our first swifts as well.
Oh, wonderful. I've been watching out for the swifts here at Earsham. It's still a bit chilly, and particularly along the east coast where you're likely to see them first of all. But I think the average arrival date for swifts here in the UK is about May the 15th. So I'll keep my eyes peeled, and hopefully we'll have the swift flocks, the big swarms of them here later on in the summer.
highashfarm.com, and you'll find all the details about how to send emails or indeed have a look at how to make a donation as well to the podcast. And we've got one final one here, Chris, as we're keeping a lookout for...
Yes, I'm just watching out in case any arrivals, but as they're going to be right by the window, we won't miss them. It will actually go a bit darker in the hide here. But they're staying away at the moment because they're eating the vegetable matter on the fields.
Chris Wall says he's been a loyal listener for some time and comes from a farming background. Lately, I've found myself increasingly frustrated with what feels like an unbalanced view of the shooting industry in your discussions. I completely agree that the industry is not perfect. There are areas where improvement is needed, and that frustrates me as well. But at the same time, I think that can be said of almost any sector. I have close connections with a local shoot here and spend a lot of time as a gamekeeper. With a gamekeeper. His passion for wildlife and habitat management is genuinely inspiring. The estate supports a wide range of species that are increasingly rare elsewhere. Also lapwings, cuckoos, turtle doves and goshawks, just to name a few. While I agree the shooting industry must continue to evolve and improve, I do believe there is a great deal of good that comes from it as well.
Yes, I completely agree with those sentiments. I try to stay impartial, and I have to, because a lot of High Ash Farm, we owe all the woodland here to shooting in the early 1900s, the late 1850s, when the first woodlands were planted here. So I'm really respectful of the habitat that's created by shoots. Now, what I try and do is stand back from both the shooting industry and, believe it or not, the farming industry, because in both cases they're very, very traditional, and tradition means it's often difficult to change. So I tend to look in to both those industries from the outside now, and that gives me another perspective. Also, I really only pass comment if it's based on scientific fact, and I'm a long-term member of the British Trust for Ornithology, and they provide the scientific evidence. And also, I'm one of the founder members of the Partridge Group, run by the Game and Wildlife Conservancy Trust, and I send details of the partridges, that's the English grey partridge, back to the headquarters every year without fail. And partridge over the last 20 years has become a BAP species, a biodiversity action plan species, and the aim of that particular trust is to halt and reverse the decline, but it's still overall year on year declining, and yet there is ways of stopping that happening, not just with the local shoots, as mentioned there. Some of them do incredible work and they have halted and reversed the decline of the birds. But nationally, and if you become a BAP species operator, you're responsible for the population over the whole United Kingdom, and that's the challenge. So I do try and stand back and not have a biased view, because proper game management is hugely valuable to the environment.
But if a species is in danger,
yes,
and numbers are well down,
yes,
then
that's the time that when you're in an organisation, it's very difficult because of tradition to look outside it. But when you're outside, and this is what's raised many of the concerns, particularly in that email, you're looking back into it, it is easy to be critical. But what I try and do is to just give an unbiased view, and I try and be very fair to both sides. But bearing in mind, back at the Farm Office is a letter and it's almost tearful. It's from 5 of the leading gamekeepers in East Anglia, and they've said, basically, Chris, more power to your arm. We need to look after partridges in particular. And one of them mentioned the fact that 2024, Norfolk, my home county, came out top for illegal wildlife persecution. That's urban controlling things like hawks and even owls, and so a change is needed, as was mentioned in that email, and I'm behind that, but the change needs to be right, and you don't want to affect people's right to enjoyment. And shooting even red list species is legal, whether it's woodcock, which has become red list in the last 2 or 3 years, or grey partridge. Both of those are red list species, and both can legally be shot. So we need to tighten up a bit, as I think our correspondent would agree with. So there we are.
Any more thoughts or comments? Do let us know. While we sit here gazing over quite a wide expanse of South Norfolk, no sign of the rooks yet. Oh, there's one.
There's one.
But not coming to see us.
No, and that's pretty indicative. It's very dry at the moment, so I'm not entirely surprised, but what's happening is the grain right in front of us. Oh, a mallard just flew off over the hedge there. The grain is incredibly dry, and of course the young rooks need a lot of moisture in their food. So worms are hard to get today because they've migrated down into the soil because it's so dry here. We're drought stricken at the farm at the moment, and so worms are kind of off the menu. So what the rooks are looking for is tender green shoots with lots of moisture in to take back, because obviously the male rooks can't carry water, so they've got a bit of a dilemma. But I think if we sat here for an hour or two, I know we're both busy boys, so that's probably not going to happen. We would have rooks here because I topped the hide up first thing this morning with some added peanuts, and when we now arrived, I noticed no peanuts.
So someone's had them.
So somebody's had them. That's probably those male rooks that have feasted up on those. They have access to water down at the lake there, and so we've drawn a blank, and that's what happens with wildlife. So don't get upset anymore. Sometimes you go looking and you can find what you're looking for straight away.
Well, we had a magnificent view of the deer, didn't we?
Yes,
The
we
roe
did.
deer that you were talking about.
Yes, it came almost up to the hide and then just ambled across the field in front of us while I was talking. There's a surprise, talking. So there we are. We've been spoilt, but there are some ambling round now, just eyeing up the bird hide here. The truck's parked out of the way, so it's more or less out of sight, so that won't be putting them off. It's the fact it's dry food on that table, and they need something with a lot of moisture in. It's quite a bit like me.
Well, there's quite a breeze, isn't there? The bird feeders are sort of swinging around in the wind.
Yes.
We've got a magnificent view here, not just of Chris's farm, but not too far in the distance. There's County Hall, the administrative hub for the whole of Norfolk, that's in the sunlight over there. And look at that little stiletto heel pointing to the sky there.
Yes, look at that. It's Norwich Cathedral. Absolutely beautiful. And now the sun's coming out and that shadow moves across the field at great speed and exposing 2026's wildflower field, part of which has just been resown with a new annual mix. Neil and Daniel have been busy towards the end of last week, and there's a whole new mix gone in there for flowering this summer, because it's an annual mix, and that's combined with all the perennial mixes we've got. Hopefully we'll visit some of the orchids in next week's countryside podcast, so we'll look forward to that. And we've got a lovely little flock of rooks and jackdaws just teasing us halfway down the hedge here. So I'm quite tempted to keep sitting here, and you can walk back to the farm. It's only a mile.
I'll see you next week, Chris.
Maybe.